Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Three Girls, One Deck, or more like Three Girls, One Deck series. Because this is a special series where, as promised, we have decided to focus on making connections between the Raven Cycle series by author Maggie Stiefvater and the Raven's Prophecy Tarot, also by Maggie Stiefvater. So I'm Julie. We have Sarah from Suns About Tarot and Heather for anybody who's coming in and not familiar with us and our Three Girls series in general. So before we begin, I will do my best to put in timestamps where needed, but this is a series where, spoiler alert, there will be spoilers. So just be aware that, we are not holding anything back. So we will do our best to provide a plot summary of the book that we are focusing on, and then, again, just talk about the different connections that we have noticed from the book to the tarot deck. Now, the tarot deck was designed to be inspired by the series, but not dependent on the series. We're going to focus on the Raven Boys. This is the first book of the four book,
Mm-hmm.
4 books, right? Raven Cycle series. Okay, Sarah, do you want to help us out with just kind of a general premise plot summary
Sure.
of the book?
Sure, I can do that. And just as an FYI to everybody who is considering reading these books, I highly, highly recommend them.
Yes.
I have actually read them multiple times since they first came out. It's one of my favorite young adult series I've ever read. I think it's really interesting, well written, and wonderful. So the main plot summary of this series is it all takes place in a town called Henrietta, Virginia. So in Virginia, in the United States. And in Virginia, in Henrietta, Virginia, there is a school called Aglenby Academy, which is a school for a boys' school that is made up of very, very rich boys. And the school's insignia is a raven. So that is where this concept of the Raven Boys begins to come from. But there's also a character in the book who is a local of Henrietta. Her name is Blue Sargent. And she is, like I said, a local of Henrietta. She lives at a house called 300 Foxway with her mom. She doesn't know her dad or know where her dad came from or who he was. She lives with her mom and a bunch of other relatives and friends, all women. And her mom and all of these other women are psychics. Blue herself is not a psychic, but she has the ability to make psychics and magical powers around her stronger. They basically think of her as being like a battery who can power the magical powers and the psychic abilities around her. So Blue, as a local of a townie of Henrietta, really, really hates Raven Boys. She really hates all these rich, obnoxious boys who go to this fancy school in town. Now, at this school, there is a group of boys who are actually very, very interesting boys. One of them is named Richard Campbell Gansey III. He is old Virginia money, and his parents are like in politics in the DC area, and he is incredibly rich. He is massively allergic to bees and had a near-death experience as a child where he was stung by bees and almost died. And he is a very eccentric individual and is consumed with a quest, basically. He has spent years of his life convinced that, I don't if folks have heard of the concept of ley lines. There are these invisible lines of power that connect various places across the planet. These lines have magical things happen around them. And further, that back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, a Welsh king, Owen Glendower, came to the United States and was buried on a ley line in Virginia that goes through Henrietta. And basically, he believes that if he can find Glendower somewhere along this ley line, he can be granted a wish. Basically, the idea is that Glendower isn't really dead; he's only sleeping, and if you find him, he'll grant you wishes. He also has, along with him on this quest, some friends. There's Adam, who is another Henrietta Townie, but is also a scholarship student at Aglenby, and comes from a very poor home, an abusive home, has a real chip on his shoulder about money, but is incredibly smart and successful and works really, really hard. There's also their other friend, Ronan, who is a very sort of tough, tattooed guy. He likes racing cars. He's very reckless. His father died under mysterious circumstances a little while before the events of the story start taking place. And he has a very difficult relationship with his brothers and a very weird family situation as a result of that. And then there is Noah, their other friend, about which I don't even want to say anything about Noah, because Noah is like the best plot twist of all time, in my personal opinion. But he's their other somewhat mysterious friend that they're friends with. And so Blue meets these three boys, and through a variety of circumstances, involving her finding Gansey's journal documenting his search for Glendower at her place of work, as well as Gansey coming to Blue's home to get tarot readings and psychic readings from Blue's mom and her friends and fellow psychics who live in Blue's home. So that is the I just talked for so long. That is the premise of the story.
But that you did an excellent job. Honestly, I would not have been able to do that. I would have been like,
yeah.
Oh.
And so Blue, somewhat against her will, and despite the fact that her mother has cautioned her not to become friends with these Raven boys for a variety of reasons, which I'll get into in just a second, she, somewhat against her will, finds herself getting drawn into friendship with them and getting obsessed as well with Gansey's quest to find Glendower. Now, the reason that Blue's mom has told her not to start getting involved with the Raven boys is A, because Blue has been told her whole entire life that if she ever kisses her true love, he will die. It's just a thing that every psychic has ever told her. As well as the fact that at the very beginning of the books, Blue is present for a ritual, basically where they are able to find out the names of people who are going to die in the coming year, and one of the people who comes up is Gansey. So Blue is living with the secret that she believes that Gansey is one of the people who's destined to die at some point in the coming year. So,
yes.
Da-da-da!
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Wild, intriguing shit. So, yeah, hopefully people find that intriguing. So good.
It is really good. It is really good. When I was rereading it, for this series, I'm just like, oh my God. I'm not really one to reread a lot of books a lot of times, or, rewatch a lot of movies and stuff. So the fact that I was rereading it and wanted to reread it, like I was once again entertained. It's just anyway. Okay, let's. Do we want to start off with some of the major cards that we've chosen and how we connect that with the book? And we're just focusing on book one. So we have the Fool, which looks like this.
Mine looks different because I still have.
Oh yes, I modified.
Yeah. Can I just, right, it's not really connected to the book, but it is connected to the book. When I was rereading the first book, I actually kind of fell in love with the orange borders a little bit, because I realised that she chose the colour that she did because of the car, because of Pig, because there is a moment in the book where she tells you that the car is a bright orange car, and I was like, oh no, it makes so much more sense.
It never even occurred to me, but yes, that color, that shade of orange, and that orange Camaro,
yes,
Gansey drives. So Gansey drives this absolute piece of garbage,
yes.
Camaro, orange Camaro called the Pig, and it is an absolute. It's described as like violently orange.
Violently orange.
It's almost like a character in its own right, isn't it?
It is. It is.
And I was like, okay, you know what? Now I totally get the border choice.
That makes me appreciate it more.
Me too.
And I will not. I still like my coffee. I have enough at the bottom.
You can't buy another one with borders.
I am not. I'm not. I will not. But yeah, no, that's a great connection.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, you know, the reason, even though Gansey is rich as shit and he could get any car he wanted, and this pig is known for breaking down all the time, and his friends are constantly complaining, like, why do you keep this POS around? And at some point in the book, he admits, like, it makes him unique, you know. It's and I think that's a defining characteristic, one of them, of Gansey.
Yes.
You know, so
and he also loves to collect. He's a collector of things,
yes,
and in some ways a collector of people.
Yes,
very definitely the leader of the group, but
right.
he also lives in an old abandoned factory himself because he's rich, obviously. So he bought this abandoned factory and filled it with random crap that he loves, basically just old rotary phones and, you know, a giant like map of Henrietta that he built out of cereal boxes and like all kinds of weird stuff. And he's a very interesting person. Very interesting.
And I think also with the Camaro and just in general, the cars that we'll see throughout these series, Maggie Stiefvater is such a fan of fast cars. And if you've seen the author's cars, you know, she has them up on her social, you will see the connection of how, you know, the details of the cars are just so rich, and, you know, she's very knowledgeable about fast cars. So, okay. So we have the Fool here, and what do we want to talk about with the Fool in terms of who you think this represents?
I mean, the Fool, I think, is very obviously blue.
Yeah, I think that even though the book is called The Raven Boys, even though the series is called The Raven Cycle, I think ultimately the story is Blue's story.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is.
And that's why I guess for the Fool makes such perfect sense for Blue.
Yeah.
Well, and, you know, for her, it really is, you know, her whole process of getting involved with these boys, in a way almost against her will, because she thinks of Raven Boys as being just like these just rich assholes. She doesn't want to be friends with any of them, and she yet finds herself making friends with them and embarking on this adventure, but even going against the advice of her mom. Everything she's being told is like, you got to stay away from them because they're on this quest that's dangerous and bad things are going to happen and Gansey's probably going to die, and don't kiss any of them. Oh my God, you know, like rules. And yet, despite all of that, she finds herself moving forward and becoming part of all of this and part of this journey and this quest. So
exactly. And even like the silhouette of her hair, she's got in like little kind of spiky pig like ponytail or something. So she's she's described in the book of like having this kind of like tufts of hair that she's like carelessly, like, or not so carelessly, but to be look careless, to, you know, like put up in these like artistic spikes and to look, you know, to look cool. You know, she's the one that de-stresses her pants and her clothes. She shreds them, and she, you know, she's very much about carrying that certain look. I guess. What look would that be? Like, not grunge, but like...
It's important for her to be an individualist.
It's important, yes, exactly.
Very, very important for her to be an individualist. Exactly. And so, you know, and that's part of the reason why, you know, when she initially meets these Raven Boys, you know, she kind of thinks of them all as being, you know, they're all rich. They're all the same. You know, they all wear their rich boy clothes and drive their rich boy cars, and then starts to realize that actually they're all wildly intriguing, just like her. They all have their own damage, their own desires, their own things that they're going through. And so it's, you know, she basically learns that individuality is not always something that you can see on the outside. So, yeah.
But I also think, to some degree, it's not even just about being an individual, is it? It's about being different. Like, she's already different because of her family situation, and her family, her, you know, her mother and the people she lives with are all well-known psychics in the town.
Right.
She's already different, so she embraces that difference. I think there's even a bit in the book where she talks about school, and she's saying that she noticed, she learned really early on that people don't pick on you for your differences, the more obvious your differences are. So she really cultivates that air of being an individual to highlight the fact that she is different because she knows she's different.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a part where she even talks about how, like, you know, being nonconformist in the early days of school is really difficult, but once you get into high school, being a nonconformist becomes cool. Like, I guess I'm cool in high school because everybody has decided that being different is actually something to aspire to.
Right. So, right. And it's really interesting too, because, you know, she's different in that she, you know, expresses herself physically, you know, with her aesthetic, right? And also she is, instead of having the gift of being psychic like her mother and her mother's friends, she is more the conduit, like she is more the battery, right? She is the one that, so, and sometimes you get the sense that it's like, oh, you know, I'm the one who's not the psychic. You know, we've got my really talented and awesome, like, psychic mother and her two friends. So the mother's name is Mara, and the two friends, there's Kala and Persephone. So those are the three, I guess, main women that are kind of focused on more throughout the series. But so that another way sets her apart too. Sometimes, like, I get the sense not necessarily for the better though. She feels like, like I'm the one, you know, I'm just the battery. I can't predict the future. I can't sense anything. I don't have that sight. I just enhance everyone else's.
Yeah, there's a they talk a lot about how it, you know, that one of the things that makes Blue different is that she's sensible. Like,
that's
quite a bit. Like, compared to the rest of her family and the people around her, like, she's a very practical person. She's very down to earth. She's very, you know, like, strategic in the way that she thinks about things, and she's, you know, she I think that she, at one point, I think Gansey even is thinking about how she's, like, fanciful in appearance but sensible in personality. So
which I think is a theme that runs through the book, all of the books, not just with her but with all of them. Like you just said about, you know, she has this opinion of these boys because of the way they dress and the cars they drive and the fact that they have money, and yet none of the five main characters are in the book are the people on the inside that they allow themselves to appear as on the outside. None of them. And I think it's really interesting. That's one of the things that makes their characters so interesting, because what you see with them is most definitely not what you actually get.
So then next up we have the High Priestess. So it's the image of a hand and it's holding a mirror. Although I will say, at first, I think when I first got the deck, I was like, oh, is that a magnifying glass or is it a mirror? I wasn't necessarily sure.
I mean, I could see where you would think it was a magnifying glass, because it looks like it's magnifying the sky behind it, which makes sense.
Yeah. And to me, it's interesting. I think that you can actually, there's a lot you can do with that in terms of the meaning of the High Priestess, because mirror scrying is actually a huge deal in the first book.
Yeah.
Both mirrors, as well as, you know, scrying into, like, bowls of dark water and other things. And so that is a huge theme in the first book. But so it's interesting, the use of the mirror, because it can get at that aspect of the High Priestess that is looking within, right? And inner knowledge, and you can see that what the mirror is showing is not necessarily what's around, you know, directly around the mirror in the background. It looks like it's night and the mirror is reflecting day, which is very interesting. But also the way that the mirror in the book becomes a window into other places as well, and it's a magical tool that is being used to gain knowledge and gain access to information, you know, of all kinds. And so so it, you know, it really kind of gives it an expansive meaning to the High Priestess, I feel, if you come at it from that standpoint of the symbology of the mirror and how that's used in the book. So
absolutely. And I mean, and in terms of the mirror, there's the yes, the knowledge that can be gained, the different places you can access, but there's also the danger. Like whenever you're using magic, especially we see with the mirror at the end, where the mirrors were kind of used maybe incorrectly, that resulted in the disappearance of somebody, right? If I remember. So.
Yep. Yeah. The mirrors actually do end up being a very dangerous aspect of magic. And there is a character who we haven't even talked about yet, but there is a character who is only really in the first book, and is a character who makes use of lots of different scrying techniques, and it becomes really apparent that she is tapping into things that are really kind of scary and probably shouldn't be messed with, and she's willing to do some really bad stuff in order to gain power.
Right. Yeah. So it's a tricky thing. It's gaining knowledge, power. So next up, we have the Empress, and this is a scene of basically a forest. And you've got all these different colors to me, I see it as kind of symbolizing the different seasons, or a couple of the different seasons, all encapsulated in that forest simultaneously. So in the book, we discover that there is this magical forest
on the ley line.
And time is warped, and the trees speak Latin, and it's just it's full of magical energy and power.
Well, one of the main things about this forest is that what you think of comes true. So
what you think of comes true.
The forest itself is this generative place. Like there are these scenes where they think about Gansey sees some fish in a pond and then starts thinking about like, oh, those fish, they shouldn't be there. Like they could, I suppose they could be this species of fish, but if that were the case, they should be this color.
Right.
And then all of a sudden the fish are that color.
That's true.
And you start to realize that whatever they think of in this forest
come
true in the real world.
Yes.
And so that's where that real like creative power of the forest.
Creative power, exactly. And just like the richness of the environment. Yeah. And I think there's also one point where like one of them says, we should be looking for water. There should be water. And then Blue's like, and there's water.
Exactly. So it's whatever they think should be there is suddenly there. So
But it works the other way, doesn't it? Because there's that moment with Adam, and I can't remember exactly what he's thinking towards the end, where he thinks something and then automatically thinks the opposite, because he realizes that the forest is literal. It doesn't recognize metaphors and all that kind of stuff. It's you think something and it will literally create whatever it is that you're thinking.
Yes.
Which can be very dangerous and cause severe injury.
Losing your skin, for example, as a random suggestion.
Scary things happen to people who tamper with his power. So
I love Caves Water. Caves Water is like the car. This whole extra character.
It is. It's just so beautifully described, and love it.
It's also a place I actually wouldn't want to go.
Yeah.
Because that level of like, I just have to think something. It's so hard to control your thoughts. It's so hard. It's almost impossible. Yeah. And to have to be that careful to not think something flippantly that this forest then goes, yeah, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
No, don't do that.
Exactly.
And
the forest itself too. I mean, when they describe literally, because time is warped in the forest, it can be summer and you can step into the forest and it's winter in the forest, or it's day in the forest when it's night in the rest of the world. Like it's a very eerie sort of strange place, which I think is what is being got at here with the seasons.
Yes, exactly.
Some of this card looks like winter and some looks like it's like kind of, you can't really tell really what each it is. I think that is a definite reference to Caves Water, and it's such a cool Empress. I feel like because of
so good.
Yeah, such a good choice. definitely.
All right, next up, we have the Emperor.
Mhm.
So here we see a sword and a crown that's, what is the sword impaled into? Is that just like a boulder or something, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just a gap in a stone, like the sword in the stone, which
Okay,
is
yeah.
very like iconic of
Sure.
legends,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
From a Welsh mythology point of view.
Yes.
The legend of sleeping kings, basically.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, the king, the emperor,
Yeah.
in a more literal sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely a reference to that whole concept of a sleeping king. So,
But I think it's also, like, to me, there's also that reference to Ganzi as well, because it's his quest. Glendower is ultimately his quest. It's his obsession, if you like, and he is like the epitome of the emperor character in the story when it comes to their relationships and the way that everybody looks to him, and he's just the person in charge effortlessly without, having to lay down the law and all that kind of stuff. Which I think when you think about, when I think about the emperor, that's what I think of, somebody who is effortlessly in control.
Yes, in control. And I think in the book, there's also reference to him, like him wanting to be the king. He admires the Welsh king, or Glendower, because in a way, it's like those are the attributes that he ultimately aspires to as well.
Yeah, and Ganzi, absolutely, he is the leader of the group in a way that nobody ever talks about, discusses, but just accepts, and it's everybody understands that it's Ganzi's ride, and they're just all along for it.
Yeah,
really what they're doing. So,
yep. Next up this is one of my favorites. It's the Hermit.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lit lantern inside, I guess like a cavern, like it's inside a tree basically.
Mm-hmm.
So the trunk of the tree is like hollowed out, so there's this like space that you can step into, which to me is a reference to the vision tree in Caveswater. So there is this, what they call sometimes like the dreaming tree, the vision tree, and what happens is that I think, was it their first exploration of Caveswater when they first discovered it, and they saw this tree. Adam had stepped inside, and he received a vision, and then he instructed. Well, he was freaked out. So then Blue and Ganzi, each individually did the same and had their own, individual visions. So this to me is very much a card that speaks to that.
And then interestingly at the end, when they go into the tree together, Blue and Ganzi go into the tree together to avoid the stampede, they have the same vision.
They have the same vision. Yes.
A vision in which they are both participating.
Exactly.
Both
players
in that vision. Yes. And the visions themselves are very interesting because they give insight. They give insight into, not only what could potentially happen, but also what those people most fear. Like Adam's vision is a vision of something that he deeply fears. A vision of him having committed violence, and something that he deeply fears in himself is his capacity to do that, because he's been raised by a very, very abusive father, and he over time, becomes aware of how some of his own personality has been shaped by that, and he's been damaged by that, and some of his own tendencies toward anger and things like that. And so all the visions themselves are definitely like insights into the characters that what they see tells you something about them. And so that, I think, is why it's such a good Hermit card.
Wow. So, and then Blue, yes, she also has a vision that really freaks her out. She's like, what?
Yeah.
And then actually Ganzi's vision, it seems that he was actually thrilled and excited about it. And also at the same time scared, because what he tends to do is like he's excited about something, but then he has to like prepare, right? He has to think about it. He has to wait. He has to do more research. He has to. So, it's not that they went back to Cavewater immediately. He was just like, oh, let's go, let's do this. But then they didn't, right? They ended up like going and getting gelatos or something. I don't know. And they made the next visit. He felt that they were ready, right? To make
the vision is like something that they both deeply want and profoundly fear.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting. Ganzi's, to me, is the most interesting, that he deep. I mean, the whole story is driven by his desire to find Glendower. That's the whole reason we're all here. But it's also finding him is the thing that he fears the most.
Absolutely.
And like on a surface level, I guess that's because what if it's not true? What if the stories aren't true? But even deeper than that, I think his fear is also, what if they are?
What if it is? Yeah.
What if it is all true? What does that mean?
Right. And also, what does it mean for this person I have become? I have become the person who searches. Like, I am the searching person.
Right.
Finding and having that search come to an end. What does that mean for who I am? Like, what do I become then?
Who am I without it? Yeah. Who am I
with myself?
Exactly.
We have the Wheel of Fortune, which kind of lends back to our discussion of Cavewater. So we see here leaves and like flowers, basically indicating each of the 4 seasons, arranged in kind of this cyclical pattern. So we have the idea of, again, the ebbs and flows that kind of connote the Wheel of Fortune meaning. And it's, again, interesting how time is played out in Cavewater versus in like real time Henrietta. So these ebbs and flows, these cycles could be faster than you realize or slower than you realize. You just don't know. So I thought that was really cool.
Yes. Cavewater's like a box of chocolates.
It is.
You know what you're thinking? You walk in and it's not what you expect.
Exactly.
And also another thing that I really like about thinking of Cavewater also as the Wheel of Fortune. I mean, it's a determinant of all of their fates in a lot of ways. It becomes pivotal to who they all become, especially for Adam. Cavewater becomes very pivotal to who he becomes as a person. And so it's about it is about fate and about how fate shapes you. And so that to me is another aspect of the Wheel of Fortune that you can definitely see playing out in terms of Cavewater being represented as a symbol here.
Death. So a skull with a huge crown on its head. Any guesses?
Glendower? Could it be Glendower?
Maybe. So yeah, we have this kind of literal reference to the literal awakening of Glendower. That's the whole quest, right? To literally awaken him from death. So you've got that rebirth of Glendower, but then what does that also mean for the characters themselves, right?
Not just in terms of what they wish for. I mean, in Ganzi's case, he lives his whole life with the shadow of death hanging over him because he has this terrible allergy, and he knows that at one point he almost died and was somehow saved for some reason that he doesn't quite know what it is at the beginning of the book. And so for him, finding Glendower represents a chance to live, basically, to be free of this shadow of death. For someone like Adam, finding Glendower, like what he wants to wish for is just he wants the circumstances of his life to change. He wants money. He wants privilege. He wants all of the things that his friends have that he doesn't have. So they all have these desires of what they want, when they find Glendower, what they're going to wish for that would represent a massive transformation in their own lives. And so Glendower, yeah, like you were saying, Julie, represents not just the king himself being dead and coming back to life, but also a transformation in the lives of all the characters. So
let's do Moon. Sorry, my bad. Yes, Moon. So the moon we see here, I don't know how well you can see, sorry, but it's It's the image of a raven with its head tilted back and its arms and its wings tucked in. And, it just so happens that its beak is kind of cradling the moon there. And so, any thoughts on that? This to me reminds me of the posture of I don't know what they called it in the book. What was it called? The Peruvian mark.
Petroglyphs. Those giant petroglyphs.
Nazca lines. Nazca lines is what it's called in the book, where on the ground they just look like worn-in paths. But if you look from an aerial view, they actually form a visual, right? A marker. And so this is how they found Cabeswater, because it looked like a raven with its neck twisted back and its wings tucked in.
Because of course Gansey can just rent a helicopter.
He didn't even rent one, did he? He just rang his sister.
I was like, hey, sis.
Yeah.
Life of the rich.
Yeah. Very, very, very extremely very rich people.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they decide to go on like a helicopter tour of Henrietta and to look for signs of where the ley line might be and find this raven, and that landing by this raven outline on the ground, which is actually, interestingly enough, made of oyster shells.
Yeah.
Made of crushed oyster shells. And that's how they are directed to Cabeswater.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, to me, that's interesting as a moon image because, I always think of, like, for example, the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery on the moon and how there's a pathway, like it's leading you somewhere. There's, there are things around you that might be trying to distract you or trying to, take you away from what your ultimate goal is.
Right.
Things that are not real or, trying to throw you off your path, but you are trying to remain on this path like that. There's a lot of that is what I think about when I see, again, like Pixie's version of the moon. And, and so I like this depiction of it because it harkens back to some of those messages.
Absolutely. And just the mystery of it, right? I always think that the moon is just this enigmatic, mysterious energy, which is very much, Cabeswater when they first discover it, and just so much mystery, so much much goodness.
And also how these ancient civilizations who couldn't fly made these things that can only be made sense from the air.
Yeah. I know, right? Brilliant.
Yes. Yeah. And this is why the History Channel has lots of ancient aliens content on it.
Exactly.
Mysterious things to us.
On to our final majors card for this book. We have the Judgment card. So we have what looks like a journal, a leather journal, notebook or book, and then of course the crown again. So thoughts on that?
I tell you what I love about this card, and I love about the book, and we've already kind of touched on it already. Although, the first thing you obviously think of is Gansey's or Gansey's. I don't know how you say it. I say it Gansey's, but it obviously isn't because it doesn't have an I in it. But the first thing you think of is his journal. But yes. I also think that it goes back to what we were saying about how they're all, that saying never judge a book by its cover. It's such a strong theme in the book that nothing is what it appears to be on the outside. Nothing. The forest isn't what it appears to be. The characters aren't what they appear to be. And that for me is one of the strongest themes throughout the story.
Yes.
Nothing is exactly like you're expecting it to be. And when you think you understand someone or you know something and you judge them to be a certain way, actually you're normally completely wrong.
Absolutely. And to me as well, the journal is really pivotal to a lot of characters basically deciding who they're going to be, right? Like Blue finds the journal, and that's one of the things that initially connects her to the Raven Boys. She's serving them. The first time she ever meets them, she's serving them at the pizza parlor where she works, and is like, oh my God, these guys are pretty much all complete assholes. Like, I can't stand them. And then finds the journal, and like you were saying, Heather, realizes like, what is this? What is this guy into? Like, this is...
There's a moment, isn't there, where she's like, it can't possibly be his. It can't possibly be that guy's.
Right, exactly. And so, and not only realizing that again, that she was judging the book by their cover, but also like her deciding to return the journal to him and kind of, it's like her first step of involving herself. It's like the first decision that she makes to say, yes, I'm a part of this, is returning the journal. Later on, there's another character who is basically also been on a quest for the ley line, but has done some very, very bad things in terms of wanting to get a hold of it. And so, and for him, stealing the journal from Gansey basically represents, his decision to take the low road on his quest, and to, it again. So in a way, it really does kind of, the journal itself really evokes who people are and who they decide that they're going to be, like what they decide they're going to do with their lives. So
why don't we move on to some of the cards in the minor suits that we thought pertained to the Raven Boys novel. And we'll start off with, let's start off with the wand suit. So we have the Two of Wands, and actually kind of connected to then the Three of Wands. Sorry, there's so much glare. These are shiny cards. So basically here we have this raven carrying two branches, I guess, that are crossed. And then which culminates into the Three of Wands, where they've completed, they've added the third branch to make this symbol, which in the book is the visual of what the ley line looks like and how they cross. So this is the major ley line that both Mara draws. So she's in the shower, and Blue is like out in the bathroom, like by the mirror or something, and Mara isn't she drawing?
She draws it on the shower.
She draws it on the
in the steam.
Yes, and then we see this again in Gansey's journal too, don't we?
Yeah, and right at the beginning, right when they're doing the ritual at the beginning, when they're talking to, she goes along so she can amplify the people who are going to die in the next 12 months.
Yes,
the character that she goes with, which we haven't actually talked about at all. Neve.
Neve. Yes.
She also draws it, doesn't she, in the ground outside?
That's right. Yes, she does. So it is a visual and obviously literary motif that you see throughout. So we just wanted to provide you with an actual visual, since it's clearly a reference to that. And even with the progression of the wand suit with the two, the three.
Yeah, and it represents really the early stages of their quest, right? In the books, this symbol starting to appear here and there mysteriously is really part of the jumping off point for realizing that the ley lines in Henrietta are real, and that this is part of the whole quest that they all end up going on for Glinda. So as a 2 and 3 of Wands, it's like a really, really perfect kind of symbol to use.
Next up, we have the Queen of Wands. And again, this is, to me, it was just a great visual of just different aspects of the novel. To me, just the idea of Blue's curse, the like, you kiss someone, kill them. This to me felt very like, holy shit, So I often think of that when I see this card, as well as like the three women of 300 Fox Way, especially Kala. I mean, Kala is she's a spitfire, and like her words are so cutting and Spitfire, Spitfire, exactly. So she, I mean, and really, just in general, their fortune telling, the what they're conveying, the messages that they convey, and just this I mean, oftentimes, and especially in this novel, the severity, and just the potency behind those messages and what they mean, and what they signify for the plot and for these characters. That's what I think of when I see this card. Next up, we have the Ace of Cups, which is this little baby raven. So, what do you think, ladies? I feel like this is kind of an obvious reference, but yeah.
Yep.
Baby chainsaw. So there's this. Yeah, do you want to describe?
Sure. So Ronan, the character Ronan.
Without giving too much away, because nothing really happens till the second book.
I won't give any of that word away. So the character of Ronan, at one point, basically somehow finds and adopts a baby raven, who he names Chainsaw, and Ronan, who is a very fierce, very not particularly caring person who's very angry all the time,
rage,
full of rage all the time.
Rage
ends up just completely adopting this baby raven and feeding it every 2 hours, taking care of it, and the really interesting part is that the night he finds this baby raven, Ronan has actually attempted suicide before, and the night that he finds this baby raven, he has left the house where he lives with Gansey, and has disappeared, and they don't know where he is, and Gansey is absolutely terrified that he has gone to attempt suicide again, but instead he finds him in a church cuddling this baby raven, who he has again named Chainsaw.
Love it.
And at the moment, what Chainsaw means for Ronan, and the moment at which he finds Chainsaw, and what that represents as far as him, choosing to treasure something, like choosing to have something be emotionally important to him, is very like Ace of Cups. So I think
it is very Ace of Cups.
It's very Ace of Cups. So,
but I also think, I know I keep harping on about it, but it's such a strong theme. But I think that when you see Ronan, those moments where you see Ronan with Chainsaw is when you really see Ronan. Because I think his character is angry and doesn't care, but deep down, this is a guy who's been through some horrendous trauma, who has all of these emotions that he doesn't know what to do with, and so denying them. And the only time you ever really see who he really is emotionally is when you see those little interactions with Chainsaw.
Yes. Next up, we have Seven of Cups. So we have all these different ravens, and you've got all of these. They're each holding or surrounded by different items. Like you have a feather, and you have the crown, and you have the lantern that we saw in the Hermit card, and you have leaves and the moon, and there's a serpent here. So the reason why I thought of book one with this card is, again, the introduction of this myth of finding Glendower, and if you reawaken him, you're rewarded with him granting your wishes. And so this idea of the possibilities, what that means for each character, and how they fantasize about it and think about it, and to me it felt very Seven of Cups, right? It's in one sense the possibilities seem endless, and something that could be a source of liberty in a lot of ways and positive transformation, but at the same time it sometimes even paralyzes them to think about what they would ask for, right? And how lost do you get in the idea of daydreaming about this this quest and these wishes, right? It all comes down to that's what they're after, right? They want their wishes granted. So
I also really like on this card that you've got so you've got the crown, which represents Glendower, which is the thing that he wants. You've got the pearls, which is, Adam ultimately is on this quest because he wants the privilege and the riches that everybody else has. Yep. You've got the lantern, which I think ultimately Ronan is on this quest because he's trying to discover who, or more specifically what, he actually is. And then you've got the snake, which you have that character, which again we haven't really talked about, but Welk, who is also in search of the ley lines, but specifically for power and for control, and who is ultimately a bit of a snake. I just love that.
So good.
Well, and this card too especially reminds me of Adam in a lot of ways, because there are so many times when we're told everything that Adam wants, and it's like Adam is like just so filled with wanting. And I can't remember if it's in book 1 or book 2, because I have just started book 2, where it talks about, all of the things that Adam wants, and it rattles off this just litany of things. He wants an apartment with granite countertops. He wants a nice car. He wants an extra hour of sleep.
Yeah.
And it just, he wants to, it just lists all of these things that he's just this like yawning hole of want.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that he's going to Aglenby is because those things can be offered to him as a result of that. That's like why he's so committed to staying in that school. And so the ravens are the things that is the thing that offers him what he wants. And so even though ravens are the symbol for cups in this deck, like
they're also they're
the symbol of offering to Adam the things that he wants out of his life. So I like that symbolism of the card too.
Love that. All right, next up we have the 9 of Swords. So we have the hand, and then reflecting back on itself is a skeletal hand. So what are your thoughts, ladies?
So, I mean, this to me very much harkens back to Gansey, because again, Gansey has this horrible allergy to bees and had a near-death experience as a child, where he almost died as a result of bee stings. And
he did actually die, didn't he?
He did, yeah. His heart stopped. We sort of discover later on that there is a reason for why he came back, actually. And so, but the fact of that is always hovering over him. Like there's a whole moment in the book where there's a wasp inside of his house, and he thinks about how death is like so close to him all the time. And, it's really, really pivotal to who he is as a character, is just this fact of death hovering over him. And that's, what's driving him to seek Glendower. And so I always think, the 9 of Swords always just makes me think of Gansey.
Right. Okay. So FYI, as we continue on with this conversation of this card, this is a huge spoiler that even we do not want to rob you of. So we will mark this as a mega spoiler. And once you see, and I'll put that in text, and once that ends, then you'll know it's okay to resume this video if you don't want this particular spoiler spoiled for you. It's a good one.
It's one of the best twists.
It's so good,
in my opinion. So
it's so good. Okay, here we go. And the mega spoiler is Heather.
Okay, so my take on the 9 of Swords is huge spoiler. Noah is actually dead. Right? We all know this, obviously. About 50% of the way through the book, you find out that Noah is actually dead. He's been dead for 7 years. Like, literally the first words out of his mouth are, I am dead, or I've been dead for 7 years. And you find out as the story goes on, when we're talking about the bee stings, that Gansey hears this voice telling him that someone else is going to die so he can live. And it turns out that Noah and Gansey, we think, it happened at the same time. So Noah died so Gansey could live. And this card just really, really speaks to me of that, because you've got that and when they do discover, because they discover Noah's bones, which is how we find out that he's dead. So you've got like Noah's bones and Gansey's hand, and how strongly they're connected through death, specifically through death. I just love that. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
That's so good. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Last card, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. The Knight of Swords. Oops, sorry, glare. So I have a pair of shears, and we can see that its tip is red with what looks like blood. So, thoughts on this image? Sarah, I think you had some.
Oh, yeah. Well, so one of the people this image makes me think of is Blue, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Setting aside the whole bloody aspect of the shears, Blue, as we've already discussed, is somebody who takes great pride in being an individual. And one of the things that she does is she does lots of like cutting up her clothes and creating like different artworks out of recycled stuff that she puts on the walls of her room. And like, so, and it's a very, she's individualist in a very sort of assertive and kind of confronting way to people. Like she really like asserts her individuality in a very like strong way where she's, she doesn't like, she's just very she's very assertive about it, which is also very Knight of Swords to me. So that aspect of Blue and her personality has that Knight of Swords connotation. So that's one of the reasons I specifically like the choice of the scissors in this. I mean, it could be a knife or something like that, but instead it's specifically scissors.
Yeah.
And that does call to mind those aspects of Blue as a character. So
I think that's it for the minors, right? So we have pretty much concluded book 1, Raven Boys, and the connections to the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. So we will resume with book 2, which is called The Dream Thieves.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Yeah, book 2, The Dream Thieves. So look out for that in the next month or so.
Book 2 was my first 5-star read of the series. I'm just putting it out there for anyone who hasn't read it yet. Book 2 was my first 5-star read of the series. Wasn't my last, but it was definitely my first.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So if you didn't already guess, we love this series. We love this series, and we love the deck, and yeah. So Maggie Stiefvater, if you're ever watching, thank you. So good. So good.
Just love it.
Nailed it. Okay. Okay. If you have any other questions or comments for us, any additional insight for those of you who have read the series, anything that you want to share or add, please let us know in the comments below. And I think that is it. Anything to add, Heather or Sarah?
No, nothing to add. But just to say, just to make sure people know, obviously we didn't talk about every card in the deck because a lot of cards we feel like are potentially, even though they could have been pertinent to book 1, are potentially more pertinent to other books. So they're very well maybe cards where you're like, why didn't you talk about this one? But it's probable that we maybe decided that we're going to talk about that one in a later installment. So just like we're, we would love to hear everybody's insights, obviously, but we very purposely didn't talk about every card that connected to the Raven cycle. So
yeah, exactly.
But even if we didn't talk about a card because we're saving it for a later book,
right? Yeah, it doesn't mean you guys can't.
Yeah, you can talk about it as it pertains to book 1, obviously. Yeah, book 1. Just so that we can, save the good stuff too. Because it just gets so good. Book 1 was great, and it just gets better. So, absolutely. And, there will be cards that we don't mention at all. Because, again, this is meant to be a standalone, deck on its own, that you don't need the book series as a crutch to be able to use the deck. So I think there will be several cards that we just don't even touch on, that's just more of like a standalone image to coincide with the main motifs of the theme. So, okay. All right. So until the next time, thank you so very much. And we hope you enjoyed, and much love and take care.